Hey friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. Today we're talking about the infamous design process. Woo! So if that interests you, then keep watching and consider subscribing to support the community. Being able to speak about your design process is a really important skill to land a UX job. It can feel like there's a lot of pressure around what to say in an interview or how you should write your case studies in general. Before I continue, I want to make the disclaimer that I'm going to be addressing this subject based on my own unique experiences, and it may be different for you, but this is the talk that I wish that I had earlier as a new designer. I know UX designers are probably really interested in what to say to get a job, about what to say about their process. I do want to talk about that. I do also want to talk about what the difference is between the design process we all might learn from Medium articles or online or boot camps versus what it is really like on your first job or on any job, because it's different. It's really different. The first thing I want to talk about is, so why is it important to be able to talk about your process? When you interview for a job, there's a certain amount of subjectivity for design that isn't typically present for other jobs, such as engineering. In engineering, you can have link to a GitHub repo and see the work that was done in that code, and it usually either works or it doesn't. I believe that design is much more subjective about how it gets created and how you measure its success or not. And when you talk to a potential employer, they have all this anxiety about design in particular because they want to guarantee that this designer will work out. And design is more subjective, especially if you're interviewing with people that are not designers themselves. Then they may not have the vocabulary to really talk and the understanding that you have. The other piece of bad news is that what a company is looking for is different, and it depends on what they need and what their design culture is. For example, Facebook requests that you keep the talk about your process to a minimum. Startups might want to see somebody take more charge. Bigger organizations might be more impressed with how you worked cross-functionally or with other teams. So what you should focus on really should be tailored for the role that you are going for. But they might want to be trying to see if you're a designer that can think for themselves, or if you're a designer that needs a lot of hand-holding and wants to be told exactly what to do so they can push pixels around and spit out screens and mocks. A lot of designers love doing that. They just want to be heads down and really in the visuals of the work. Also, were you designing things because you made the design decision because you thought it looked cool? Or did you understand the business goals and were able to work with the team to make a better product, and do iteration to keep improving it? If I'm keeping it 100% real, I've seen so many different ways that the design process can go, and sometimes I'm not sure what to say during these interviews myself. But I try to focus on the basics, like understanding the user needs, the business goals, doing that iterative process, usually if you can get data, making database decisions and shipping on time. There is a big discrepancy about what we get taught about the design process and what the design process really is. At some point early in the game of UX design, we get shown this design process flowchart thing There are so many of them out there. There's the double diamond one is really popular. They might come from really credible sources such as IDEO or Nielsen Norman or something like that. It's basically some version of you start out empathizing with the user's pain points, and then you build a hypothesis about the solution, what the solutions could be. Then you're going to start iterating and ideating a solution, refining, testing, making a more viable prototype, ship the winner, just really the one that's most successfully addressing the pain point. And then sometimes they're like arrows and they might like circle back to other steps. They may even include some touch points with other stakeholders such as PM or engineering or what have you. So the problem teaching this to students is, I think it's a huge disservice because we are not also telling them that this chart is something that happens under the ideal conditions for design. And do you know how often I've gotten the ideal conditions for a project for design? Never. Never, ever. Never in the history of ever has it gone exactly according to plan. It's not realistic. It doesn't happen this way. It's booby-trapped, and there are things you can do. There are things that designers can do to mitigate the risk. And we don't talk about it. We just pretend that this is the diagram, it's the answer to the day, it's going to save the day, and it's a huge disservice to everybody. So what happens when you start a job? And I see new designers who start, or maybe inexperienced, and they're like, this is the process, this is the Bible, this is how we work, and they govern themselves based on that, and then they start getting resistance from their team because the team doesn't have the same understanding and conviction in the process that you might or they might, and they're like, we need to follow the design process, and everyone else in the team is like, whatever, and then you're kind of stuck and you don't know how to move forward. So let's talk about some of the realities that can break this diagram if you didn't expect them, and in no particular order. It might be not having access to real users or testing, having missing, incomplete, or changing requirements, having insufficient time to complete every step of the design process, not having the budget to do what you want or your first best case scenario, having technical infeasibility, having a stakeholder with an agenda and opinion that isn't supported by the findings or the process that you've outlined. These are just a few small and realistic things that are awaiting for you when you start your design job. And I don't want new designers to be blindsided the way that I was really blindsided. So what do we do when you can't really follow the design process closely? Well, my biggest piece of advice is to remain calm. It's very easy to feel a lot of different emotions like panic, oh no, what am I gonna do? Anger, resentment, like I've explained to the PM through the research findings and they don't want to listen to me anyway, and you can feel depressed or hopeless or doomed to make the terrible product. There's a long list of reactions that you may have. So tip one is to stay calm. Obstacles are normal. They're normal. And this is where the real design work begins. Tip two, do not blindly crusade the design process. Listen, negotiate. I've seen designers who just think that they need to enforce the design methodology more, and then surely that will fix the problem. That's never been a successful strategy in my experience. They will do more research, make additional presentations, and it's sort of like trying to win an argument by arguing louder. Look for other skills that you may have in your toolbox, like listen deeply to what the concern is. Is the issue that the engineering team feels intimidated by the level of work required by the design that you're proposing? Did the PM promise a feature to somebody else and doesn't want to lose face? Try to identify what the issue is that's preventing the design process to take place. Try to address, persuade, negotiate, and compromise once you feel sure that you understand the reason for that opposition. When you talk to your team and there's an issue, make sure you listen to the concern being communicated, and if possible, ask them detailed questions about that concern. Try reiterating the concern back to them, and making sure you understand it. Is it like, okay, do you think that the engineering time spent on this design will mean that we miss the launch date that we had? Is it the whole design? Is there something in particular about the design? Don't try to be right. Try to be a team. So we are really concerned about the launch date, right? Well, would the team feel more comfortable? How would the team feel more comfortable about that? Try not to make a face when they ask you to redesign everything, if they do that. And instead you can say, wow, that's a lot of redesign. Do you think that that's the only way that we can make the launch date? If I redesign everything, what worries you the most? What you're trying to do is to play ball here. And you may have to redesign some things. You may have to redesign everything. Maybe you just push the launch date back. But what you want to do is let them know that whatever their top concern is, you are trying to address. Then they don't need to be as defensive about their concerns, and you have a higher chance of having a rational compromise and better work and a more successful product. You may have to get good at understanding the politics in the team or the company to do your job better, and that is part of the reality of design. Sometimes it's so political, you have to try to understand what the real concern is and read between the lines. Sometimes people don't want to come right out and say what their fear is, so you have to kind of play detective and figure out what are they afraid of and communicate that and understand what that secret fear might actually be. Maybe they fear the team looking bad, but they won't admit that. So instead they might phrase it something like, well, we really want to make sure our team is communicating the value of all the hard work that we're doing. They may not say, hey, our last few projects were really a flop and the company isn't doing well. People are nervous about being laid off, and we just want to ensure that we aren't taking on too much. So it helps to kind of have a high emotional intelligence to understand how to work with people and assure them that you also have their best interests at heart. It's also much easier for people to have an opinion about design because of how visual in nature it is. People, I think, are less likely to argue about engineering implementation because it's easier to accept that they are not the SME or subject matter expert in that area. So try not to get ruffled by that. Everybody has an opinion. It does help to have research to back up your design decisions. You can try to do guerrilla testing and know how to modulate the design process to make best use of it. I love it when I can say, hey, let's not argue about this. Give me a few days and I can perform an A/B testing and get back to you, or something like that. And it might get the team out of am I right or are you right, and more into trying to get the team to get into that successful headspace. The third tip is knowing how and who you're to collaborate with. You can Google a RACI or a RACI chart. That's RACI chart. Sometimes when you're a new designer, you might feel shy or have this whole imposter syndrome thing going on that's hard to reach out and share work early. Sometimes you also don't know who it's okay to talk to and who is not okay to talk to. I've had situations where I have asked for feedback and showed work to a person, and that conversation upset another stakeholder. I'm not going to lie to you, it gets messy. Forcing people to talk gets messy. More often than not, what's happened to me is just when you can see the finish line of a project, and then a new stakeholder comes in that hasn't been identified earlier, and they have opinions, and it totally messes up the game plan and all the progress that you've made. So that's why it's really vital to get buy-in from your stakeholders very early in the process. All the legs of the stool should be there. I try to show wireframes and send invites to research sessions to my PMs and engineering, because you want to know what all the issues people have, the concerns they have early, so you can have time to resolve them. The danger here is that if you do all your designs and then you bring the PM and engineering in, engineering might say that they can't build them, or the PM might say it's not what they want, and you've wasted a bunch of time. You want to avoid that at all costs. So share work early, listen to their ideas, ask them to wireframe or whiteboard with you, and you might be surprised at how good their ideas really are. My fourth tip is to know when to choose your battles. Pick your battles. Sometimes you have to build the wrong thing to build the right thing later. If you've tried every trick in the book and you're not being listened to, often what that is a symptom of not having enough trust. I've noticed in my own journey that I've gotten better and better at this particular part, and I've noticed that other people enjoy working with me more and more when I develop this skill. When you overexert your sanity fighting about something, it's a sure way to burn out as well. It's a skill to be able to see something blow up in the team's face and resist the urge. Every urge in your body wants you to turn around and say, "I told you so," but you wouldn't want them to do that to you. Even if you had an idea that you fought for and it was successful, you wouldn't want to just rub it in their face or anything like that. It takes a lot more grace to lose as a team and explain the process of why the team made the decision that it did, that they thought it was the best thing to do at the time. Everybody has to bear those consequences. Design does sometimes get blamed, I think, when things go wrong. And if it happens a lot, you may want to look at why it's happening. If there's a miscommunication, or if the company doesn't understand the benefits of failure and risk-taking. Failing is often an important step of the process, so if failure in any form isn't tolerated, then you may not want to be in that place and stick around long term. As Edison reportedly said about his many attempts to invent the light bulb, "I have not failed 700 times, I have not failed once, I have succeeded in proving that those 700 ways will not work." So that's it for me today, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you found any value in this video, leave a comment about what you want me to talk about next. And until next time, I'll see you later.